For 300 years, the Martians rebuilt their society from virtually nothing. After suffering nuclear bombardment from the Earth Defense Force, the Martians had to start ground zero, rebuilding their cities, their ecosystems, their infrastructure, and attempt to re-terraform Mars. The Mars of 26 AD is very different than its predecessor, the Mars from 2300. With a fraction of the original population pre-orbital bombardment, Mars is now a brutal caste society full of cutthroats, the strong, bounty hunters, mercenaries, and corporate elite. Despite having rebuilt majority of their civilization over the last 300 years, majority of Martian society is still a brutal free-for-all. It is from this brutal society that only the strong thrive. Today we'll be talking about those that rule Mars with an iron grip, the corporations and their patron god Bargain, the god of merchants. This is Simon, welcome to the Soapbox, the only lore channel on YouTube for the Godfall Chronicles. Let's get into it. The Godfall Chronicles is a space opera consisting of 7 books that cover the entire Milky Way. It is full of multiple different civilizations, both humanoid and not. But to understand how humanity exploded across the intergalactic stage, we first have to go back and analyze the birthplace of humanity's domain, planet of Mars. You see, it would be from Mars that the great vagabonds would rise and lead humanity across the stars. But to understand the tenacity and the sheer grit of the vagabonds, you first have to take a look at the society that they were born into. In the year 2600 AD, the Martian society is divided into 2 very different sects. You have those that were raised in the nomad wastes, and then you have those that grew up in the big cities, otherwise known as biodomes. Regardless of if you grew up in the nomad waste or you grew up in a big city, life was extremely hard. It would be a rigid adherence to the pantheon of the 13, the self-proclaimed gods of Mars, that would keep some Martian society somewhat in check. If you are curious to discover how the Martian pantheon came to be, or which Martian god is, I encourage you to look up my other videos. But today we'll be focusing on Bargain, the god of merchants. You see, Bargain is the third of the Martian 13 gods. You see, within the Martian hierarchy of the 13 gods, Bargain is placed as third, with Sol Invictus as king of the gods at number 1, and Amor, the goddess of love and fertility, at number 2. But if Bargain is simply the god of commerce and merchants, why is he the third most important? You see, Bargain's patrons are actually the most strongest on Mars. It is typically the corporations, the business leaders, the businessmen, the entrepreneurs and CEOs, and the lords and nobles of Mars that tend to adhere to Bargain. But to understand why the most important and wealthy within the Martian society adhere to simply Bargain, we have to take a look at who the man was before the Great War. You see, during the 7-year conflict that erupted between Earth and her colony Mars, there was an orbital blockade that cut off all resources from going into Mars. And while this conflict would ultimately end in Martian defeat with an orbital bombardment, it would be Bargain to become one of the most important and famous men throughout the conflict. You see, Bargain's original mortal name has been lost to history, but the people of Mars remember him for his innovation and kindness. You see, Bargain was originally born on Earth, and he was known for being extravagant. You see, Bargain came from wealth. He didn't want for anything. His family owned the shipping lanes that ran the logistics of the solar system, from Earth to Luna to Mars, Venus, and even the asteroid belt. It was Bargain's family company that ran the shipping lanes. Now you see, Bargain's family was allowed to have a monopoly on shipping because they were one of the founding members of the one world government of Earth. However, despite his deep ties to the government of Earth, Bargain looked upon the suffering of the Martian people and felt a pang of sympathy. This sympathy would merely grow when his sister was killed during the New Washington massacre, in which 50 Martians were killed by Earth Defense military force. It would be this heartbreak and this suffering that would be used as leverage against him. 2 years after New Washington massacre, Bargain was approached by Georgia, who would soon become the god of fertile soil and agriculture. And Georgia was ultimately the one that was able to convince Bargain to join the network, even in secret. Over the course of the war between Earth and Mars, Bargain would be the one that was said was known as the Pirate Network, an intricate, top secret and obscure network of pirates, smugglers, and shady businessmen. Bargain was able to bribe, blackmail, and persuade businessmen across the solar system to support Mars logistically and economically. And this is why he's third in the hierarchy of the 13 gods. He may not be as powerful as, say, the god of war, Bellum, or the king of the gods, Sol Invictus, nor is he as shady or as stealthy as Nema, the goddess of death, or the nameless one, the 13th god. But Bargain is simply one of the most important because he was the one that kept the supplies running. After the fall of Mars, Bargain would disappear, and his patrons would go on to venerate him, calling him the god of commerce and merchants. In the year 2600 AD, it would typically be the corporations that venerate him the most. However, despite the fact that the man who would soon become the god, Bargain, was considered kind, empathetic, and compassionate, his patrons are often the complete opposite. You see, the patrons of Bargain believe that he will bless their commerce through ruthlessness. And who can blame them? After 300 years of rebuilding society, it's only the strongest and most ruthless that rise to the top of the food chain, especially within the corporations. And that's why, in the modern context of 2600 AD, within the big cities like Hangzhou, New St. Petersburg, or New Washington, bargain is often seen being venerated by the most wealthy and often despicable corporate leaders. His sigil can be seen on law firms, temples, business buildings, and skyscrapers. Because of his association with the most powerful and tyrannical parties on Mars, it is oftentimes the common folk that tend to actually hate the god Commerce and tend to shun him and not pray to him. However, this is seen as unlucky because the people of Mars are superstitious folk. Even though the most powerful and ruthless among them are often ones praying to him, it is still sometimes even the most lowly common merchants within the waste that pray to Bargain for a good deal. What's also unique about Bargain compared to his other gods is that the patrons of Bargain don't have a mantra. In fact, they prefer lavish tribute, lavish sacrifices, even sometimes human sacrifices to their god. When a business does well or a corporation does well, the patrons of Bargain believe that he has shown them favor. Vice versa, when a corporation goes bankrupt, or let's say a merchant loses all his merchandise, they believe that they may have angered the god of merchants. And that's why, whenever you're making a deal on Mars, you'll see the scales, the sigil of Bargain, the god of merchants and commerce. This has been Simon. Welcome to the Soapbox. If you enjoy lore like this, I'm pleased to announce that I will be publishing these books beginning 2026. Have a good day.